Here's what's coming up on The World Today. U.S. President Donald Trump suggests the presidential election in November could be postponed, citing concern over postal voting. Authorities in Hong Kong disqualified 12 pro-democracy candidates from participating in upcoming elections, deepening political tensions in the Chinese territory. Plus, NASA's next-generation Mars rover Perseverance blasts off from Florida's Cape Canaveral. Welcome to the program today. I'm Akaite Afia here in Lagos. U.S. President Donald Trump is tweeting like he always does, and for the most part, his tweets draw a lot of attention. This one included in this tweet, President Trump raises the possibility of delaying the November presidential election despite its being enshrined in the U.S. Constitution, drawing immediate objections from Democrats. Now, it's not clear if Mr. Trump is serious about this, as any such move will require action by Congress, which holds the power to set the timing of elections. But the president in this tweet repeated claims of mail-in voter fraud and raised the question of a delay, writing, "Delay the election until people can properly, securely, and safely vote." There has been no response from the White House about the president's tweet. The president has cast doubt on the legitimacy of mail-in ballots, which have been used in far greater numbers in primary elections amid the coronavirus pandemic. He has also made some unsubstantiated allegations that voting will be rigged and has refused to say he would accept official election results if he lost. Well, let's talk to VOA's White House Bureau Chief, Steve Herman, who is currently in Alexandria, Virginia. Steve, welcome to the program.
My pleasure to be here.
So tell us, have there ever been problems with mail-in votes to the extent that major concerns have been raised about them even before President Trump's tweets?
No, it has been President Trump who has been on this hobby horse about the mail-in ballots for some months now. And so his tweet today isn't shocking. It's a bit surprising and disturbing to people in both parties. But he has really been criticizing this process and alleging that it's just ripe for fraud. But election officials in all 50 states say there's really no evidence of that.
And being that there is no evidence, would Congress need to take action on moving the date of the U.S. presidential election? If that were to happen at all, what sort of circumstances would warrant U.S. Congress to make that decision? And can they do that, seeing November is only just a few months away?
Well, there would really have to be something unforeseen and apocalyptic. Under the Constitution, this date is set by the Congress. The President of the United States himself or other officers in his government cannot move the date. What we're really talking about for the date to be moved at this late juncture, we would really have to see something like a nuclear war breakout or a new type of pandemic that just would mean that nobody could really leave their house, or, an alien invasion. And it has to be something on that scale that would merit a delay for a United States presidential election.
So have White House officials attempted to explain away the president's tweet and whether or not he's serious about this?
Well, there's been no comment from the White House itself. I did get a comment from a former White House spokesman who's now a spokesman for the Trump re-election campaign, Hogan Gidley, and he told us that the president is just raising a question about the chaos Democrats have created with their insistence on all mail-in voting, and saying that the Democrats are using the coronavirus pandemic as a means to try to institute this mail-in voting, which means sending every registered voter a ballot, whether they ask for one or not. So that's really the issue of contention, and the president pushing back heavily along with Republicans. But I think it's very important to note at this hour that Republican leaders in the House and the Senate are saying the election date is not going to be changed. We're going to have this presidential election on November 3rd.
Well, then I guess we'll be looking forward to see what the outcome is in November. Thanks again, Steve, for joining us today.
My pleasure.
At least 12 pro-democracy candidates in Hong Kong will not be allowed to participate in the region's upcoming elections. Opposition legislators had hoped to obtain a majority in the Legislative Council in the polls in September after Beijing's imposition of the national security law. Among those barred are high-profile activists Joshua Wong and Lester Shum. The government says they are not fit to run for office. The reasons given are that they advocated for or promoted Hong Kong's independence, solicited intervention by foreign governments in Hong Kong's affairs, and expressed an objection in principle to the imposition of the national security law by central authorities in Beijing, and that they expressed an intention to exercise the functions of a let-go member by indiscriminately voting down any legislative proposals introduced by the Hong Kong government, so as to force the government to accede to certain political demands. The government said the decision was taken in line with Hong Kong's mini-constitution, the Basic Law. One of the two pro-democracy activists has reacted to the disqualification from the election, Joshua Wong, who released an online statement earlier today calling on other activists to not surrender. The large number of disqualifications is sure to infuriate supporters of democracy, which comes just a month after Communist Party rulers in Beijing announced the national security law that reigns in dissent in the semi-autonomous city. And it could also steer China further onto a collision path with the West.
My name is Joshua Wong, activist from Hong Kong. I was planned to run for office today related to the 2020 Hong Kong Legislative Council election. Returning officer Alice Choi has decided my nomination invalid today at about 3:56 p.m. I was just disqualified from running in the upcoming Legislative Council election, even though I got the highest vote share in the primary with more than 30,000 votes obtained. The excuse they use is that I describe national security law as a draconian law, which shows that I do not support this whipping law. Despite more than 500,000 people, which means more than 600,000 Hong Kongers voting in Hong Kong's primary, Beijing now staged the biggest ever crackdown on the city's election by disqualifying nearly all pro-democracy runners, from young progressive groups to traditional moderate parties.
Let's check in on the politics on this continent as Cote d'Ivoire President Alassane Ouattara is being called to run on a third term, defying opponents who say he does not have the constitutional right to a third term. President Ouattara is yet to share his thoughts on the matter, saying instead he will be announcing a decision in a forthcoming national address. Meanwhile, Hamed Bakayoko has been named the country's new prime minister. This comes just a couple of weeks after Prime Minister Amadou Coulibaly died of a cardiac arrest.
Cote d'Ivoire's Electoral Commission promises a fair election as the ruling RHDP asks President Ouattara to stand again, defying opponents who say he does not have the constitutional right to a third term. The election is seen as the biggest test yet to attain the stability achieved since a brief civil war killed about 3,000 people in 2010 and 2011. The Election Commission's role is particularly sensitive. A dispute over Ouattara's 2010 poll victory sparked the conflict, and opposition parties suspect local election officers favor Ouattara. The presidential race was upset earlier this month by the death of the preferred successor of Ouattara, Prime Minister Amadou Coulibaly, after the 78-year-old economist had said he could not stand again.
Dear supporters, you know how painful these moments are for me in particular, and for Aja Fatoumata Gon Coulibaly, wife of late Prime Minister Coulibaly. You see, we often say in Africa that it is the son who organizes his father's or his mother's funeral, and not the other way around. So you understand, because Amadou was my son.
Responding to a formal request from his party on Wednesday to run for re-election, Ouattara asked for some time to consider, but added, "You know I have not disappointed you." Addressing party members, he said he would announce his decision in a speech to the nation. He was due to make a public address on August the 6th. Opponents say the two-term limit in the constitution bars him from standing again, but Ouattara has said his first two terms mandates do not count under the charter from 2016. The other main confirmed candidate is Henry Konan Bédié, who was president from 1993 to 1999 and leads one of the Cote d'Ivoire's largest parties, the PDCI. Bédié says he had agreed with the former President Gbagbo that their parties would back the other's candidate in the event of a second-round runoff against Ouattara. Gbagbo, who resides in Belgium and was acquitted of war crimes by the International Criminal Court last year, has not yet confirmed he will run as candidate of his FPI party, but his application for travel documents to return to Cote d'Ivoire has raised expectations that an announcement could be imminent.
Many countries across Europe have been reporting daily record increases in new COVID-19 cases, prompting fear of a wider surge across the continent. Now, this is going on just as the U.S. state of Texas surpasses New York, which was for months the epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak in the United States. Here's the global update.
The United States reached a grim new milestone on Wednesday, surpassing 150,000 coronavirus deaths, the most of any country in the world, nearly a quarter of the global death toll. More than 10,000 Americans have died in the last 11 days. New York, which was for months the outbreak epicenter in the United States, has been overtaken by Texas, which is now counting over 418,000 total cases, compared to New York's more than 413,000, according to Johns Hopkins University data.
Do you think that's anxiety, that he's a little... I think so. Frequently.
Admitted to this hospital.
And what did she come in with?
This is her CT. Yeah.
With almost 485,000 cases, California is still leading in total cases. Overall, the U.S. has recorded over 4.4 million cases and 150,716 deaths.
Pretty much fighting two wars. It's interesting because, I have been in the middle of earthquakes, in the middle of bombings, in the middle of tsunamis. I've been in every possible catastrophe that you can imagine. And by far, this is the worst. And this is the worst because this is a continuous situation. The other ones, something bad happens and then you run, you take care of things, and that's it. Here, continues to occur. And what is probably the most disappointing thing, the thing that annoys me the most, is that we keep on doing our best to save all these people, and then you get another batch of people that are doing exactly the opposite of what you are telling them not to do.
Addressing the people of the UK, Prime Minister Boris Johnson said it's absolutely vital as a country we don't delude ourselves that somehow we're out of the woods or this is all over, because it isn't all over. Adding that the resurgence of the virus was visible in some countries in Europe and in the US, and that people must continue to follow social distancing guidelines to avoid a second wave. In Brazil, a majority of coronavirus strains were traced to 3 virus groups from Europe. According to researchers, the work was conducted by researchers from Imperial College COVID-19 response team with 15 Brazilian institutions and the University of Oxford. They estimate that over 75% of the strains fell under groups from Europe by sequencing 427 genomes found in Brazil around late February and early March. The death toll in Brazil surpassed 90,000 and the number of people testing positive went over 2.5 million. Vietnam has advised tens of thousands of people who visited the city of Da Nang to report to disease control centers as 9 new coronavirus cases were confirmed and the country scrambled to contain its first outbreak in over 3 months. In just over a few days, a total of 47 people linked to Da Nang have tested positive. News of patient 416's infection prompted the mass exodus of over 80,000 tourists from the popular resort city.
Still ahead on the program. Waxworks form socially distanced queues for Madame Tussauds London reopening. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us on The World Today. One person has been killed, many more injured following an explosion at a hotspot restaurant in Koriyama, Japan. According to its owner, the Onyasai restaurant was undergoing repairs when the explosion happened. It has apologized to the victims and said it was working with authorities to determine the cause. The restaurant was reduced to a shell with windows shattered in nearby buildings and pieces of metal and glass scattered around the block. NASA's Next Generation Mars rover Perseverance today blasted off from Florida's Cape Canaveral atop an Atlas V rocket on a $2.4 billion mission to search for traces of potential past life on Earth's planetary neighbor. The Next Generation robotic rover, a car-sized six-wheeled scientific vehicle, also is scheduled to deploy a mini helicopter on Mars and test out equipment for future human missions to the fourth planet from the Sun. It is expected to reach Mars next February. It soared into the sky under clear, sunny, and warm conditions, carried by an Atlas V rocket from the Boeing-Lockheed joint venture United Launch Alliance. The launch took place after the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California, where its mission engineers were located, was rattled by an earthquake. This marked NASA's 9th journey to the Martian surface. Perseverance is due to land at the base of an 820-foot deep crater called Jezero, a former lake from 3.5 billion years ago that scientists suspect could bear evidence of potential past microbial life on Mars.
Engine response looks good. And Mach 1, Atlas V is now supersonic.
Hidden and protected for millennia, an ancient shipwreck in Greece is opening to the public for the first time on Monday, August 3rd, fusing archaeological wonders in the depths of the sea with the marvels of modern-day artificial intelligence. Access to underwater sites is typically restricted in Greece to preserve their integrity, but authorities have been able to allow recreational diving at the shipwreck at Peristera thanks to computer surveillance technology. Underwater cameras monitor the site and use image recognition software to alert administrators instantly if the wreck is in danger of being disturbed. The site is located off a tiny outcrop of the Aegean island of Alonissos, where a wooden vessel sank in the late 5th century BC, taking with it thousands of amorphous, pointy-bottom clay jugs used for commerce across the ancient Mediterranean.
We have installed in specific locations the cameras in order to be able to recognize if anybody or anything like a robotic operated vehicle has entered this protected area. What runs behind this live streaming is a special algorithm with artificial intelligence that is able to recognize in real time various classes of objects. You can imagine that we can realize that there is a diver in the area of the wreck, and the system is able to distinguish him around the blue or the dark water, around the wreck, around the fishes, against the sun ball. So it's quite a difficult task, but such technology can handle it almost perfectly.
It is the day before the Eid celebrations among Muslims around the world, and as can be expected, people are making last-minute purchases of rams for the festival tomorrow. Here's a look at those preparations from around the world.
Bangladeshi Muslims gathered at cattle markets in Dhaka ahead of the al-Adha festival amidst the coronavirus pandemic, as the government relaxed lockdown measures temporarily to allow a few cattle markets to operate in the capital city. Local residents, some wearing masks, led cattle off the boats as livestock arrived at the Buriganga River. For Indonesian livestock farmers, many have turned to social media to sell traditionally sacrificed animals ahead of the Eid al-Adha, reducing the chance of spreading the coronavirus by physical visits to the farms. Health experts have been concerned about the risks of the coronavirus being spread during religious festivals in the world's biggest Muslim-majority country, when people typically gather in mosques and homes or travel to their hometowns. Cut off from the world and the coronavirus, Gazans are thronging beaches and crowding markets filled with holiday sweets and clothes as they prepare to celebrate the Eid, largely free of the coronavirus restrictions affecting the Muslim festivals elsewhere. But the relaxed attitude contrasts with the lack of money in the coastal strip, which has been largely closed off from the world for years, by an Israeli-led blockade, and could yet be badly affected if the virus struck. No cases have been recorded in the towns and refugee camps where its 2 million Palestinian population live, although 75 infections and 1 death have occurred in quarantine centers. And in the West Bank, slaughterhouses typically crowded with Palestinian Muslims buying sheep for the annual Eid al-Adha Feast of Sacrifice were nearly empty this week as coronavirus curbs weigh on the economy. The Palestinian Authority has imposed a partial lockdown over areas under its control to battle a surge in new cases, forcing many businesses to close and sending unemployment to an estimated 18%. Eid al-Adha is one of the 2 most important festivals of the Islamic calendar. Muslims around the world traditionally purchase livestock, and after slaughtering, the meat is distributed to poorer members of the community.
Madame Tussauds' most popular figures led by example today as they formed a socially distanced queue outside the Wax Museum to celebrate the venue's reopening after months of closure due to the coronavirus pandemic. One of London's most notable tourist attractions, Madame Tussauds, closed its door on March 20th, and after more than 4 months, visitors will be allowed again from Saturday, August 1st. Even more good news, the general manager of the London studio, Tim Waters, says strict social distancing measures are in place to ensure the safety of guests and staff. The waxworks brought out to entice visitors to return to the venue included Britain's Queen Elizabeth, Prince Harry and his wife Meghan, musicians Beyoncé and Taylor Swift, Hollywood star Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and British super couple David and Victoria Beckham. Well, I'm sure Londoners are very excited about that reopening. That's all for The World Today. I'm Akaite Afia.